Day 4 at the 2025 Wimbledon Championships was inspirational, and two matches in particular inspired me a lot, and I want to talk about them. But before I do, I want to share a thought that I had today on Jannik Sinner, who is playing really well. He won his second round match against Vukic 1-1 and 3. And as well as Jannik played in this match, I think he can play even better. And in the on-court interview after the match, Jannik said that there are a few things that he can still work on. So that's the great thing about Jannik. He's always looking to improve. But let me share my thoughts on Jannik's Roland Garros loss to Alcaraz and how that's going to affect him in this Wimbledon Championships. So a lot of people have been talking about that match still to this day. And I've been listening to the BBC feed with John McEnroe. And John McEnroe has been asked about his loss in '84 to Lendl at Roland Garros, which was a match that he had in his hands and he let it slip away after being up 2-0. And John says that still to this day, he thinks about this loss. But today, he was asked something very different. And they started talking about his loss to Bjorn Borg in 1980. And if you remember, that was one of the greatest tennis matches of all time. It featured that fourth set tiebreak that went 18-16, if I remember correctly, in McEnroe's favor, and Borg ended up winning the fifth set 8-6. And interestingly, McEnroe talked about this match, and he said that he was inspired by this loss. It showed him that he had to get in better shape, and he was pretty much in awe of Bjorn Borg and how he was able to handle the pressure. So that loss didn't destroy him, it motivated him. And in 1981, McEnroe came back and beat Borg in the final in 4 sets. And I'm going to make the comparison between McEnroe and Borg in 80 and 81 to Sinner and Alcaraz now. See, the thing about a loss having so much importance that it destroys a player mentally and possibly destroys a player's tennis career, it has to be a very specific scenario. And there has to be a strong feeling in the player that he or she missed out on an opportunity that will never ever come back. I think when that scenario is present, it is then when the loss hurts really bad and a player never forgets about that loss. But you cannot make that argument for Sinner that he will never have a chance to win a Grand Slam, for example, or more specifically, that he will never have a chance to win Roland Garros. He will have many more chances, and he knows it, just like McEnroe knew that he had a strong chance to win Wimbledon because he was so close. He needed to get in better shape, the type of shape that Bjorn Borg was in. And in the case of the '84 Roland Garros final, where McEnroe lost to Lendl, McEnroe had a strong feeling that this was the last time that he will have a chance to win Roland Garros because clay was his least preferred surface. So I'm still feeling good about picking Sinner to beat Alcaraz in the final. If you compare the first couple of matches that both of them played, Sinner has clearly been more solid. But, you know, when it comes to those guys playing each other, that doesn't really mean anything because Alcaraz finds his best level against Sinner. But it's way too early to talk about Sinner versus Alcaraz because there are so many great players in this tournament, and Sinner will possibly play Djokovic in the semifinals, who was on absolute fire. He played flawless tennis against Dan Evans, who's a tricky grass court player. Djokovic committed only one unforced error, and that was the bag that he had with him on the court. It was one of those bags that holds one racket, and in the first round, he had his normal racket in there, and today he put a wooden racket in there. So maybe some of you guys like that type of bag. I personally don't. But Novak is on absolute fire. And over the past few years, I've been hearing so much that the Western grip is a disaster on grass and you can't possibly win. But there are so many examples of players with Western grips doing really well at Wimbledon. For example, Marketa Vondrousova with a full Western grip won Wimbledon in 2023. Now, Djokovic's forehand grip is not a full Western. See, the base of your index knuckle has to be at bevel number 5 for it to be a true Western grip. This is not where Djokovic is at on his forehand, but he's also not in a semi-Western grip, which is the 4th bevel. He's somewhere in between. So between a semi-Western and a Western grip, but nevertheless, this is an extreme grip. And if you saw how Djokovic handled the excellent slice backhand from Dan Evans today. He had absolutely no problem. So this myth is something that I hear a lot, that a Western grip or Western grips in general are problematic on grass or on low balls. That is absolutely not true, because even with a Western grip, you can find the correct angle to handle a low ball. When it becomes challenging is players who don't have a Western grip. Let's say you play with Eastern grip or a semi-Western grip, and now you turn the racket over to a Western grip. You're going to have an intuitive wrist angle at the moment of contact, and that's going to close the racket face. And now you're going to start dumping a lot of balls into the net, and it's going to be absolutely impossible to handle a low ball. But if you always set a Western grip, low balls are for sure not a problem at all. When I watch Grand Slam tournaments, I will have multiple screens running, and I try to absorb as much information as I possibly can. And when I see a player that I'm not so familiar with, I will definitely try to learn about that player. And as I was scrolling through the matches, I saw the name Holmgren from Denmark. And I was familiar with the name, but I've never seen him play. So I clicked on this match, and they were deep in the fourth set, and Machac had love 40, up 5-4, and 2-1. 3 consecutive match points. Holmgren wins 5 points in a row and ends up winning that set 7-5. I stayed for the entire fifth set that went 7-6 in Holmgren's favor. Holmgren's story is so inspirational because here's what happened in 2022. Holmgren played for the University of San Diego, and he was ranked number 1 in the NCAA. And in the NCAA singles final, he faced the number 2 ranked player in the NCAA, and that was Ben Shelton, who played for University of Florida. I ended up watching the third set of this match, and it was very interesting. It was a very tight encounter, and Ben Shelton ended up winning this match 6-2 in the third. And if you compare the careers of Holmgren and Ben Shelton after that match, these guys had very different results. Holmgren did go up in the rankings, but obviously not as high as Ben Shelton, who quickly became one of the superstars of tennis. And it is so interesting to me, and it is what makes tennis so mysterious, that two players that are of a similar caliber can have such different results. And interestingly, when you look at Holmgren's game, even though he's right-handed, his serve is very similar to Ben Shelton. So Holmgren has a huge game. He serves 140, and the way he loads his serve is in a very aggressive way, deep knee bend, and he turns his butt into the court, similar to Ben Shelton, or if you remember, Sam Groth. So an incredibly aggressive loading position, and he gets a tremendous amount of heat on that serve. But that's not all. Holmgren also has a one-handed backhand and somewhat of an unorthodox forehand, where the strings are pointing towards the other side of the court before he drops the racket. He had a very difficult time over the past 12 months or so to get out of the challenger level. And in fact, his results actually got worse this year, where he lost in the first round of a challenger on 7 occasions, and multiple other times he actually lost in the qualies of a challenger. Prior to the Wimbledon tournament, he only played 1 match on grass, which was a challenger where he lost in the first round of qualifying in straight sets. Now, his ranking was high enough at 192 in the world to make it into the qualies of Wimbledon, and he won the first round, and he was actually down 3 match points in the second round of qualies to Kukushkin, but he made it out of the qualies, won the first round, and it was so inspiring to see him come through this match where Machac had a lot of chances to close it out, and there was a big delay at the beginning of the fifth set, which made it more complicated for Holmgren. I think he was sitting on the bench for about 15 minutes because Machac decided to change his clothes, and he left the court and he was arguing with the umpire for a while. And then Machac comes back and he's serving at 100 miles an hour. He was either cramping or had issues with the wrist, but it was so weird because Machac was still ripping from the baseline, and he was throughout the entirety of the match pretty much dominating Holmgren in the baseline rallies. But Holmgren's advantage was his absolute monster serve and trying to be aggressive on the return. Despite having some issues with his right hand, Machac was the better player through the majority of that fifth set. He even had some break chances late in that fifth set, but once they got to the fifth set tiebreak, Holmgren started ripping balls on the line, and he actually ramped up his serve speed. And for the first time in the match, he served 140. This was a life-changing victory for Holmgren, who made more than double of the prize money that he made in the entire year in just one tournament. But that's not all. He made almost the equal amount of money in this Wimbledon Championship that he made in his entire career. He made 152,000 British pounds, which is approximately 207,000 US dollars. Now, the tournament is not over for Holmgren. He is going to have a very difficult match, possibly tougher than the Machac match, because he plays a grass court master, and that's Alex de Minaur. So it's going to be a very difficult match. But Holmgren does have that monster serve, and if he's able to serve well, anything can happen. The 2025 Wimbledon tournament has proven that for sure. For you guys that don't know, I'm Croatian, and I always support Croatian players. And Cilic is one of the best Croatian players in the history of tennis. Two others that you might know are Goran Ivanišević and Iva Majoli, but there are many other great tennis players from Croatia. So when Cilic plays, I am always supportive of him. However, I did pick him to lose to Draper. Now, I've been tracking Cilic's results, and I did not think that he still had this level in him. He was ranked outside the top 1,000 a year ago. Marin has been struggling with knee problems. He had one surgery in 2023 on his knee, and then he had to have another surgery in 2024. Now, Marin was still at the top of the game only a few years ago. He finished 2022 ranked 17 in the world. So it wasn't a situation where his level suddenly dropped off. He had injury problems. Now, Marin being 36 years old, I thought it was going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get back to the top of the game, because most players that get injured that late in their career end up ending their career. So the fact that Cilic has been able to claw his way back into the top 100 is super impressive. He played well in the Dubai tournament, where he took out Popyrin and de Minaur, and that was super impressive to me. Now, interestingly, Cilic did not play any ATP tournaments other than Grand Slam qualifying, and he competed on the Challenger Tour. A very interesting choice, because I'm sure he would have gotten some wildcards here and there. And I think this has served Marin well, because he won 2 challengers and he got a lot of confidence from winning a lot of matches, and he was able to get himself back into the top 100. Now, what I think helped him in this Wimbledon draw was the fact that he won a challenger on grass shortly prior to Wimbledon. And despite all that, I still did not think that he was going to be able to beat Draper, who was ranked number 4 in the world. But Marin proved in this match that, number 1, he still has his top level, and number 2, that he is a big-time player that's for sure going to be in the Hall of Fame. Marin is one of 5 active players that has 20-plus titles. Marin is number 12 on the all-time career earnings list, with having earned $31 million. Marin has been in the semifinal of every single Grand Slam tournament, including Roland Garros. Marin can also play on the clay. Of course, I'm sure a lot of you guys know that he won the US Open in 2014. He was in the Wimbledon final in 2017, and he was also in the Australian Open final in 2018. Marin also won a Masters Series title. So we're talking about an absolute big-time player. And the inspirational thing is that despite him having all these accomplishments, he still has the passion and the drive to go back into the challenger level. And not like Agassi did back in the day by only playing 2 of them. He played half a year's worth of challengers to get himself back into the top 100. And for you guys that don't know what challengers are, a lot of them don't have a lot of spectators, maybe a few hundred people in the stands. And if you're someone that was in Grand Slam finals, and like I said, the guy is number 12 on the all-time career earnings list in the history of tennis, to put yourself in those lower levels and try your best is something that a lot of players are not willing to do, quite frankly. A lot of players will retire when they have to play challengers. They're just simply unwilling to stoop down to that level. So My respect for Marin Cilic is huge. Never mind beating Jack Draper. To be able to go through the challengers and make it back into the top 100 at the age of 36 is incredibly inspirational. Now, the good news for Marin is not only that he has a game that perfectly suits the grass courts, a humongous serve, he can flatten out his ground strokes despite his height and the knee surgeries. He's moving exceptionally well. But also, his draw opened up. He plays Munar next, who is a good player, but this is a winnable match for Cilic. And then in the fourth round, he will possibly play Machac. And despite Machac beating Djokovic in the Miami final, grass is not his best surface. So I also think that that match is a winnable one for Cilic. So he could make it to the quarterfinals. It's possible.